Okay, the last video that I posted was this one. It's the turbo boost map, and next to it is the N75 turbo control map. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go and look for, and there we are. I could have just gone over here and picked boost limiting map. I'm going to go and look for the boost limiting map. There we are. I'll double click on that one. It's opened a bit small, but not like it. Okay, now what we've got here is basically the same map that we had before. It's just sort of rearranged very slightly, and the reason being that I want to make sure, or the designers want to make sure, if you like, I want to make sure by showing you that we don't get silly boost levels, because if we get silly boost levels then we might come unstuck and do some damage, especially to the turbocharger. So that's what this is all about. It's just to stop us getting silly boost levels. Now there is a single value that stops things getting completely and utterly out of control, and for that I'll just go and click on it because I found it in an earlier video. There we are, 2620. So that's 2620 millibars. Now that is an absolute safety valve. If you hit that, the turbocharger will be switched off by the ECU. So if you hit that number, so you might spike over the values that are on the map that we were talking about just now, and you might get away with it. But if you hit this one, you will drop straight into limp mode and the turbocharger will switch off, because that will be deemed unacceptable by the designers. So that's what that one's for. Right, now if I then jump straight back to our boost limiting map that we were looking at, which has managed to hide itself. There we go, gotcha. Right, there we are. Now what we've got then here is we've got the values that were on the map, and if you think back to seeing the last video, assuming that you watched the last video, we had a maximum of 2350. So there's a maximum of 2350, and we've got over here 2375, 2375, 2375, 2355, and here we've got 2400, 2400. So what we've got is we had a maximum boost on our boost map of 2350. Now the designers have obviously said to themselves that they can control via the N75 valve the boost within reasonably fine limits, but they've picked a value of 2400 as their peak for 2350. But what they've actually done as well is that they've picked peaks all over the place, which is why it's a big map like that and not one result. I mean, if one value would do, we'd only have one value, and we've got one value for the absolute maximum, but here we've got lots of values, and the lots of values are at different revs. So if we go across here, we can say, well, okay, look, there's a maximum of 2 at 1500 revs, and then the maximum becomes 2.35 or 2350 at 1900 revs. And the absolute maximum that this map is prepared to allow at 2250 is 2400 millibars, and that maximum remains. So in other words, not under any circumstances should you be above 2400. Now usually the way these things work in terms of errors is that if you rise above 2400 and then the turbo boost drops back fairly quickly, nothing happens. But if you rise above 2400 and stay above it for a set time, and that time is built into the file, then what happens is the ECU says, no, that's not what we've got built into our design, and you drop into limp mode and the turbocharger stops working. Now anyone who's had this, or anyone who's knowledgeable about these things, knows that it's not a constantly limiting thing. In other words, if you switch the ignition off and then switch it back on, you'll be okay and good to go, and limp mode will be gone. But as soon as you go over this value for a fixed time again, you drop back into limp mode. So that's the way that bit works. And of course that range of values is different as we go across here, and the reason for that is that you've been given a different set for different air pressures. Now they're not hugely different, but they are slightly different, which means that if you go out and try to get maximum performance out of your car on one particular day when the air pressure is, let's say, lowish, you've got one set of values which will affect what's going on in terms of limitation of the turbocharger. But if you go out on another day when the air pressure is much higher, the values are slightly different. So for once, when people say, well, my car seems to drive differently on different days, at least here there is a scientific reason why that might actually be the truth on occasion. Whether you can feel the difference is another matter, but there is a slight difference, and it's been taken into account by the designers. The main reason it's been taken into account we've discussed before. It's this business of if you end up driving up a mountain, because the turbocharger will simply spin out of control and self-destruct. So down here these figures have been changed considerably to try and stop the turbocharger from spinning too fast in thin air and destroying itself. Right, I think that's probably enough information for now on that one, so I'll close that one and I'll stop there.